Humans have a strange habit. Whenever we have something important to do, we suddenly feel the urge to do almost anything else. Clean the desk, check our phone, watch just one more video, organize files we haven't touched in months, reply to messages that could easily wait. Somehow, everything starts to feel productive, except the one thing we actually need to do. And the strange part is that we know exactly what's happening. We know we're avoiding the task. We know we'll regret it later. We even promise ourselves that we'll start in just a minute. But that minute somehow turns into 30, or an hour, or sometimes the entire day. Almost every human recognizes this experience immediately. And yet, despite how common it is, procrastination still feels strangely irrational. Why would we avoid something that we know is important? Why would we delay work that will only become more stressful later? And why does our brain seem so good at convincing us that starting tomorrow is somehow a better idea? To understand this strange human behavior, we need to look a little closer at how the human brain deals with effort, discomfort, and the temptation of doing literally anything else. Procrastination is one of the most common human behaviors. It appears in students who delay studying until the night before an exam, in professionals who wait until the last possible moment to finish a project, in writers who suddenly feel the need to clean their entire apartment instead of writing a single sentence, and in people who spend hours preparing to start something without ever actually starting. What makes procrastination so fascinating is that it doesn't happen when we are relaxing. It happens when we know we should be doing something important. The human mind can clearly see the consequences. We know the deadline is coming. We know the task will not disappear. And we know that delaying it will almost certainly make things more stressful later. And yet, somehow, the brain still manages to convince us that avoiding the task right now is a perfectly reasonable decision. For a long time, people believed procrastination was simply a matter of laziness, a lack of discipline, or poor time management. But modern psychology tells a very different story. Procrastination is not really about time, and it's not really about laziness either. In fact, the reason humans procrastinate is much more interesting. To understand it, we need to look at what actually happens inside the brain the moment we face a task that feels difficult, uncertain, or uncomfortable. Because at that moment, two different systems inside the human mind begin to compete with each other. And that internal conflict is where procrastination begins. To understand procrastination, we need to look at something very important about the human brain. The brain did not evolve to maximize productivity. It evolved to help humans survive. And one of the ways it does that is by trying to avoid discomfort whenever possible. When a human faces a task that feels difficult, uncertain, or overwhelming, the brain immediately begins evaluating the situation. How much effort will this require? How long will it take? What if it goes badly? What if the result isn't good enough? Even if the human is not consciously thinking about these questions, the brain is quietly processing them in the background. And if the task seems stressful enough, the brain begins searching for alternatives. Not necessarily better alternatives, just easier ones. This happens because the brain is very sensitive to immediate emotional discomfort. Starting a difficult task often creates a small wave of negative feelings, uncertainty, mental effort, doubt, sometimes even fear of failure. And the brain tries to regulate those feelings as quickly as possible. One of the fastest ways to do that is simple: avoid the task, at least temporarily. From the brain's perspective, this works surprisingly well. The moment the human switches to something easier, checking the phone, answering messages, watching a short video, the uncomfortable feeling disappears. The brain experiences a small sense of relief, and relief is a powerful reward. This teaches the brain something important. Avoiding the task makes the discomfort go away. So the next time the human faces the same task, the brain remembers the shortcut, and procrastination becomes even more likely. Over time, this creates a loop. The brain begins to associate difficult tasks with discomfort and distractions with relief. And that loop is one of the main reasons procrastination becomes such a common human habit. This is why procrastination tends to appear most strongly in certain kinds of tasks. Not all tasks trigger it in the same way. Simple, clear activities are usually easy to start. If a human needs to wash the dishes, send a quick message, or take out the trash, the brain rarely resists for very long. But procrastination becomes much more common when a task has certain characteristics. For example, when the task is large. A project that might take hours or days to complete can feel overwhelming before it even begins. The brain looks at the size of the task and quietly decides that starting it right now might not be the best idea. Procrastination also appears more often when the task is vague. If the next step is unclear, the brain struggles to decide where to begin. And when the brain cannot see a clear starting point, avoiding the task becomes surprisingly easy. Another common trigger is evaluation. Tasks that involve being judged by others, writing something, presenting ideas, submitting work, often create subtle pressure. A human might worry that the result will not be good enough, or that the effort will reveal mistakes. And even if those thoughts are not fully conscious, the brain still reacts to the possibility of failure. Interestingly, procrastination is also common in tasks that are deeply important. Writing a book, starting a business, working on a meaningful project. The more meaningful the task feels, the higher the expectations become. And the higher the expectations, the more pressure the brain experiences before even starting. So the human delays, not because the task does not matter, but sometimes precisely because it does. In many cases, procrastination is not about avoiding work. It is about avoiding the uncomfortable emotions that come with that work. And the human brain is remarkably creative when it comes to finding ways to escape those feelings, at least for a little while. At this point, something important about procrastination begins to become visible. The human brain treats the present moment very differently from the future. Immediate experiences feel vivid and urgent. Future consequences feel distant and abstract. When a human sits down to start a difficult task, the brain does not mainly focus on the reward that may come days or weeks later. Instead, it focuses on what is happening right now. And right now, starting the task may feel uncomfortable. It requires effort. It may involve uncertainty. It may expose mistakes or imperfect work. Meanwhile, the alternatives available in the present moment are often far more appealing. Checking a phone brings instant stimulation. Watching a short video provides immediate entertainment. Even organizing the desk gives the brain a quick sense of progress. The important task may have greater long-term value, but the brain is heavily influenced by what happens in the present moment, and in the present moment, the easier activity almost always wins. This is why procrastination can feel so irrational from the outside. The human clearly understands that finishing the task earlier would reduce stress later, but the brain is constantly balancing two different forces, immediate relief and distant reward. And very often, the present moment quietly takes priority. If we observe humans closely, procrastination appears almost everywhere. A human promises to start early tomorrow. Tomorrow arrives. And for a brief moment, it really seems like today might be different. But then the familiar thoughts begin to appear. Just one more minute, just one more video, just one more small task before starting the important one. It is a strangely human pattern. We often imagine that our future self will be more motivated, more disciplined, more organized. But that future human usually turns out to be exactly the same person we are today. And maybe that is part of the reason procrastination feels so universal. It's not simply a personal flaw. It is the natural result of a brain that tries to protect us from discomfort in the present moment. A brain that prefers small, immediate relief over distant rewards. From the outside, procrastination can look irrational. Why delay something that we know will only become more stressful later? But from the brain's perspective, the logic is simple. Avoid discomfort now, deal with the consequences later. But humans are also capable of breaking this cycle. We can notice the pattern, recognize what the brain is trying to do, and sometimes choose to start anyway, even when the task feels difficult, even when motivation is low. Because in many cases, the hardest part of any task is not finishing it. It is simply beginning. And if we look closely, right now, somewhere in the world, there is probably a human who should be doing something important, a project, a piece of work, a decision they have been postponing for days. But instead, they're watching this video. If you enjoy exploring human behavior, consider subscribing. And if you found this video interesting, a like really helps the channel. After all, humans are a fascinating species to observe.